Welcome back to Sports Addicts NBA Edition. It's been a little while, so we're going to jump into a little season preview here. We're going to talk a little bit about some teams that are kind of fringe playoff teams. The NBA announced that they're going to do some uh, uh, playoff into the winner gets loser play being a play-in for the last two playoff spots. So we'll kind of talk about the teams we see that are going to be vying for those spots. We're going to break it down by East and West. Once we get through that, we're going to talk about a couple teams that we will discuss whether they should go all in or tear it completely down at the trade deadline. So Zach, you want to start? We'll start with the Eastern Conference teams, and we can just sort of go in order there.
Yep. So our first Eastern Conference team would be our sixth seed right now. That's the Atlanta Hawks, a team that spent a lot of money in free agency. On paper, got a lot better. If they did anything right, they improved their bench quite a bit. It seems like their starting lineup is probably going to be Trae Young, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Cam Reddish, John Collins, and Clint Capella, which I think is significantly better than the team they ran out last year. And then if you look deeper, off the bench, you have people like Onyeka Okongwu, who was their sixth pick, Danilo Gallinari, Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, Rajon Rondo, and then you still have people like Chris Dunn, Tony Snell behind that, if anything, will just bring in and spot minutes and play good defense. So Atlanta was one of the worst teams in the league last year. They only won 20 games. They had some issues with suspensions, with John Collins missing 25 games, and just not exactly the most talented roster and very young. So they get more experience this year. They get a bunch of veteran talent, and feels like this is a must make playoff situation for Atlanta. So what do you think about the Hawks this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have the potential to bump even higher than the sixth seed. I think their talent alone could get them up to the top four seeds. But I think with them being young, having a relatively young coach who's just, I think, in his fourth season, going into his fourth season. So they have a lot of young pieces. They're going to have to figure out the growing pains throughout the season. It's a unique season as well. I think it was Luca who said that it's going to come down to really who's got the positive for COVID. So that's going to be a big factor into it as well. But when you look on paper, when you look on how these pieces fit together, you got a lot of offensive-oriented players, but you also have some defensive wings with Cam, DeAndre, Tony Snell, and then defensive guards like Chris Dunn. So and Clint Capella being a defensive big. So they got a little bit of everything mixed in. I really like what they have. It's really going to come down to Pierce, how he manages minutes here. A lot of guys need to play, how he does that, and how he gets people involved. Trae was a very pick and roll heavy point guard. He's going to continue to do that. I don't think that changes. But now, how do you get Danilo Gallinari involved? How do you get Bogdan Bogdanovic involved? Those are guys that are very good with the ball in their hands as well. And then, not to mention Rajon Rondo, a guy that really showed what he can do with the ball in his hands in the playoffs this past year. So, just figuring out that, I think, is going to take some time. They're going to probably come off slow. People get a little bit nervous, but ultimately, I think they do end up getting that sixth seed, right around the 5 or 6 seed, and kind of be in that playoff comfortably and have the chance to win their first round.
Yeah, they got a ton of talent, and if they can ever get the roster to click together, it's really the sky's the limit. Well, the defense might hold them back at some points, but for the most part, the sky's the limit. So that's Atlanta. That's our 6th seed. Our 7th seed is going to be the Orlando Magic. Most notably this offseason, drafting Cole Anthony in the first round. For me, Chuma Okeke is essentially a draft pick for them again this year, as he didn't play at all last year. And then you also still have guys like Aaron Gordon, Jonathan Isaac, who I believe is out for the year. Is that true? Or out for some time at least?
There's a chance he could come back. There's a chance he come back by the end of the year, but um, for all intents and purposes, we'll plan to have him out.
All right, and then you still have very good forwards in Mo Bamba and obviously Nikola Vucevic. Some weird reports recently that Mo Bamba is still struggling with some COVID issues that he had several months ago. So hopefully that gets straightened out. But really, Orlando's just going to run it back from last year, it feels like. And they added Cole Anthony, who we've talked about on our draft pod, that it seems very similar to Markelle Fultz. But he's talented and will absolutely add to the roster. So do you think there's a higher ceiling for Orlando, or is there more like error coming?
I think Orlando's got a higher floor with a lower ceiling. So I think you know what you're going to get. They're going to defend. They added Dwayne Bacon in free agency, a wing defender that can really help with Evan Fournier. I like him slotting into the starting lineup and protecting Fournier and Fultz. He's a guy that can really guard 1 through 3 pretty easily. So I thought that was a really good ad. But any Steve Clifford team you're going to have, they're going to defend and get after it. And then you have offensive reliability with Vucevic. They turned the keys over to Markelle Fultz, and I think that's good timing. They didn't bring back TJ Augustine, who played really well for them last year, but I think having Fultz, Carter Williams, and Cole Anthony kind of as your floor generals, I think is fine to get you to a 7 seed. That's why I say it's not a high ceiling, because how far can those kind of guys really take you as your ball dominant guys? But they're going to defend. They're going to be in every game. They got some Vucevic that can go to in the crunch time. I think they're just really well coached. It's just hard not to have them in the playoffs, just simply because they play essentially error-free basketball and will always be in games. So I just like them as a high floor team. That is going to be hard to keep them out of the playoffs, especially when they're playing in playing games. They're really competitive. They're gonna, like I said, gonna be in it. I don't see them losing 2 or 3 playing games. So I just see them ultimately making that 7 seed.
So I was really hoping we could go the full podcast without mentioning Michael Carter Williams, but you somehow did it on me. So just kidding. That's some Syracuse hate for you. But so we obviously had Atlanta rise up. So with someone rising, we have someone falling. And that for us is the Raptors, who we have at the 8 position right here. Should we call them Tampa or Toronto this year? It's going to be a little weird, but they had a weird offseason. They re-signed Fred VanVleet, which I think was important. I think he earned that contract. I know there's been a lot of people that feel that might have been a lot for him, but I think he's been outstanding for them. And then they lost every big guy that they've ever had that wasn't named Pascal Siakam, it feels like, and then replaced them with Aaron Baines. They're going to get a lot of minutes from Chris Boucher, but they really run it back with their guards. So you still have Kyle Lowry, you still have Van Vliet, you still have Norman Powell, and I think you'll agree with this, but I think one of the sneakiest signings of the offseason was DeAndre Bembry to Toronto, because I think he will absolutely thrive in that situation. So while we're a little, and I won't even go to Terrence Davis, I'll let you have that one. But while we're a little bit lower on Toronto than I think some people are, we still think they're going to be a good team, and they're going to be very competitive for a playoff spot. Nick Nurse is one of the best coaches in the league, and it's very obvious.
Yeah, this again is similar to Orlando. They're a great coach team. They're always going to defend. They're always going to be in games. My issue is just their front court, how thin it is. Baines is a really good center. Pascal Siakam, obviously all-star level type player. But when you have guys like O'Shea Brissett, Chris Boucher is 25, 30-minute guys. I like Boucher a lot. I think he's an energy guy off the bench, but once he's getting into that 30-minute mark, that's when he can really get exposed. So I just think they lost a lot of depth in that front court, and that's going to hurt them. A lot of teams in the East are big, and if they're not big, they're strong. So I think with Siakam, if he gets in foul trouble in any game, it's going to be hard for them to win. I love Kyle Lowry, I love Fred VanVleet. I think they keep them in a lot of games. OG Anunoby is going to defend best player every game and do a really good job of that. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to be tough for them to score a lot of points, um, especially anytime one of their starting five get in foul trouble. I think their bench really falls off a cliff compared to last year. So I just think it comes to depth at this point. A lot of teams in the East got a lot better, got more depth. So nothing to knock Toronto of what they're doing. Just had a tough offseason, losing a lot of guys in key positions.
All right, so that brings us to number 9, which is the Washington Wizards, and they also finished 9 last year. Snuck their way into the new bubble and the play-in format, and then had to play without Bradley Beal, so that was a little bit unfair. But before I get too far into this, I just clicked on their team page on NBA.com and saw all these guys they signed after the draft, and like Yoli Childs, Caleb Homesley, Marlon Taylor, and Anthony Gill, and that's probably the best undrafted free agent class I've ever seen. So that's awesome for them. And then obviously the biggest news is acquiring Russell Westbrook in a trade, moving John Wall, which you and I saw some Wizards games together and know what John Wall really meant to DC and how awesome he was in that environment. So I'm a little sad about that, but I think Russell brings essentially the same type of energy, and I think DC will fall in love with Russell too if they give him a chance. But the team, for the most part, looks somewhat similar to last year. The biggest move, probably outside the Westbrook deal, is re-signing Davis Bertans. And then they also had a pretty good draft and have a good rookie class coming. So we obviously think the Wizards are going to be competitive again. And if they get into this playing situation, you have a Bradley Beal and a Russell Westbrook, and you're going to be better than most in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. So disclaimer here, we did put this together, the seedings before the Westbrook John Wall trade. A lot of a lot of this positioning came from the unknown of John Wall. He hasn't played in a long time, and it's hard to judge how he's going to come back, especially from those kind of injuries. Um, and the type of style he plays. So with Westbrook stepping in, they might bump up a little bit higher. I really like this team. Scott Brooks is a good coach. They have a lot of good pieces all over the place. Obviously, Westbrook and Bradley Beal, their foundation, those cornerstones in the offense. It's going to be really interesting to see how they work together. Bradley Beal is pretty similar to James Harden, but is much better off ball. So I think this helps Westbrook a ton, and gives him a little bit more, gives him more of the ball, where in Houston he didn't have the ball a ton, and Bradley Beal also can take him off the ball as well. So it's going to be more balanced for Westbrook, and I think that helps him a lot. The big key for me is on the wing, defensively. Can Troy Brown Jr., can Rui, can Denia, can Bertans, can those guys defend the wings that are in the East? I think that's the biggest question for the Wizards. I think Thomas Bryant brings a ton of energy. He can be really effective on the defensive end. He doesn't need the ball in offense. He's going to offense rebounding and put it back and be really good there. Mo Wagner, same thing. Can just bring a lot of energy. So I think they're fine in the front court. It's just really the wing is the biggest question. I think they did a great job of addressing that in the draft. But that's the biggest question mark right now. If they're solid enough, I think they can get up to the 7 seed. If they struggle, like times that last year they struggled, they can really fall off. So that's where I'm going to be watching all year is Troy Brown, Denny, even Garrison Matthews, and if Jerome Robinson bumps down. But those are the guys that I'm really going to watch for the Wizards and how they can push them to make the playoffs this year.
All right, so next up is number 10, which would be the Pacers, and for us, would be the last team into the play-in with the new format. So, again, another team that drops down significantly, but I don't think they really did anything in free agency, and they still have Victor Oladipo and Miles Turner on their team, and it very much feels like one of those guys won't be there, if not at the start of the season, at least by the All-Star break. So really, what's the issue with Indiana, and do you think there's a possibility they can get back to like the 4 seed like they were last year?
No. Um, I think they brought in a really good coach with Nate, and I've been practicing this, but I'm still going to mess it up. Borchkin. I apologize but it's something like that. I think they brought in, he's a great mind. He's been a great assistant for a long time, and he's finally gotten his chance here. I think that was a really good move. Other than that, they were very quiet. Did well in the draft for how little they had, getting Cassius Stanley from Duke. But ultimately, I think and we'll talk about this later. I think they lose. This team looks a lot different on this new trade deadline, which I think was just announced, and it's in March. So I think this team looks a lot different at the end of March than what we have right here. But even, let's say it stays pat, I don't think this roster has enough. Once you get to their bench, it really falls off. I like Aaron Holiday as just someone who comes off, and if he's hot, keep him in and let him play. But if he's not scoring, he's not playmaking, there's little he's doing out there. TJ McConnell, I mean, again, just an energy guard. It kind of duplicates what they have with Holiday being both smaller guards that are out there for one specific reason. And then you got guys like Doug McDermott out there just to shoot the ball. Goga's still developing. I really like him. I've been high on him since he's been drafted. And I think he's going to take a next step forward. But again, this bench here is just not where it needs to be competing at a higher level. And anytime you have a situation that Victor Oladipo is going through right now, it's going to be hard for the team to focus. And that's where my concern is how do they come together as a team and not really just blow it up? Because if you have a guy that there's rumors out there that he's telling you teams he wants to go play for them, it's hard to know that that guy has your back in a game. So Indiana's got a lot of weird things going on, just lack of depth in that old Depot situation. I don't think they end up making the playoffs.
So we'll have more on Indiana later in our new segment, but that'll bring us to the 11 seed, which would be the first team out, and that'll be Chicago Bulls. So really the question here is about coaching staff for me. So they obviously move on from Boylen and now have Billy Donovan. The roster is talented. Zach LaVine, Otto Porter, Larry Markkinen, Wendell Carter Jr., and you're drafting Patrick Williams. Kobe White obviously is there. Devon Dotson gets signed after the draft. I feel like they're talented enough to be a playoff team, and now that they have a new coaching staff, can it happen, basically, is my question.
I want it to happen. I think it can happen. It's hard for me to find a path for them. What team are they overtaking? Because they have a lot of interesting pieces. Otto Porter's coming back from a big time injury. How does he fit back in? Does he fit back in? A lot of times you saw with a guy like Nick Batum, signed a big deal, battled with injuries, and couldn't really find a spot back where he's really effective for a playoff team. How does he fit back? Wendell Carter was just grossly misused for his entire NBA career. How does Billy Donovan add him into the mix with Lauri Markkinen? And then does Daniel Gafford stay healthy? I think he's a really, really solid backup five. Could even start in some spots. So I think there's a lot of questions on in their front court. Their back court's fine. They're going to score the ball. Kobe White's going to get hot. He's going to have 30-point games pretty often. Zach LaVine is just going to be consistently scoring 20 a game. It's just the guys behind them. So Satoransky, he's as solid as they come. But they re-signed Valentine, Ryan Archdiakono, or oh boy, I'm having a hard time with names today. Archdiakono, holy cow! I'm just Ryan. There it is. Does he continue along that kind of TJ McConnell path, or does he fall off there? So they have a ton of talent. I think they're going to play well together. I think Billy Donovan's going to really take them to the next level. Jim Boylan, I don't think, was the answer for this type of roster. It's just how creative can he get offensively with the types of offensive talent he has here, but also being an effective defensive team, because their guards, there's really no defense there. So just a really unique roster. I want them to be good. I'm rooting for them. It's hard to see me have them pass Orlando or Atlanta or Toronto, teams like that.
All right, so that's the East. That's our 6 through 11 in the East. We will have like 1 through 5 in both conferences later on, but we're going to go through 6 to 11 in the West, which I think is, you could pick any teams here, and I feel like you could have an argument for why they'd be here. But for us, we're going to start with the Portland Trailblazers, a team that snuck into the playoffs after winning the play-in situation, entered the bubble not in the playoff picture, well, not in the playoffs, and ended up as the 8 seed, and then only had to beat Memphis once. Most of the reason they weren't in the playoff picture is injuries, and they are winners of free agency, if you've listened to that podcast. So they've done a lot right. They've re-signed a lot of guys, and they added a lot of young, like taking a shot on someone like Harry Giles, who might not play a ton, but if he's called on, could have big moments for them. Bringing in Derrick Jones Jr., and then re-signing guys like Rodney Hood and Melo, obviously. Like, I feel like they've done a ton correctly. So being that they are in the West, it's going to be difficult, and you can't really slip up. But the Blazers feel like a safe playoff team to me.
Yeah. I can't imagine a situation where they don't make the playoffs unless Lillard gets hurt or something crazy happens with COVID. But looking at them on paper, they have all the spots covered. They have great depth at every position. I'm just excited to see how creative Terry Stotts can get with this team. You're going to have Melo come off the bench. I think a Melo CJ second unit. CJ's going to start, but once Lillard gets his end of the first break, you're going to have CJ running the point. A CJ Melo type second unit is going to be really exciting with Rodney Hood, Derrick Jones Jr., guys like that. Maybe even Harry Giles. It's just going to be, he's got a lot of weapons as well. I think they're really effective on both sides of the ball. Obviously, Dame and CJ aren't the best defenders at the guard spot. But when you're starting Robert Covington, when you're starting Zach Collins, Yusuf Nurkic, you have rim protection, you have wing protection. So really, Dame and CJ, really all they have to do is continue what they do on defense. Is just force pick and rolls into the drop coverage, force it into the rim protection, and just don't get beat on straight line drives. So I think any kind of defense worries there are erased with guys like Covington and Zach Collins. But yeah, I mean, offense, defense, I can't see them missing the playoffs with this roster. I think they have a path to the top 4 as well. Like Atlanta, I think there's that high ceiling here. But they also have a high floor. So I think it's safe to say that they're 6 seed and up. I think that's kind of where the worst case scenario is, 6 seed.
All right, so that will bring us to the Phoenix Suns at number 7. So if you don't think the Blazers won the free agency and offseason period, you probably thought the Suns did. Suns added Chris Paul, obviously most notably, and then filled their roster with really good pieces in Jay Crowder, Etuan Moore, Langston Galloway, and obviously are building on the young roster they already have in DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker for the most part, and then throwing people like Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson. So the team is very talented, and I think they've added that one missing piece that they've needed in Chris Paul. Devin Booker has kind of been left out on the island his whole time in Phoenix, and Monty Williams showed he was going to be a great coach last year, and the way that they finished the season and ran through the bubble. Unfortunate that they missed out on the playoffs, but because honestly they might have been in it going 8-0 in the bubble, and then who knows. But the way it works, you've got to have a good regular season, and they didn't really start out that way. So this year, adding all those guys and then drafting really well with Jalen Smith, who you and I both think is going to be a perfect fit there. Phoenix has all the recipe and ingredients needed to get to the playoffs. So we have them at 7, but I also personally feel that they could probably get to even higher than 7, and I feel like you might think the same.
Yeah, I think they can certainly get higher. The reason that, or at least my reason, um, thinking that they're probably going to be lower than what their potential is because um, they have those smaller rotation. I think it's going to take some time to gel, and it's just going to be they're going to lose a couple that are going to be close just because they're figuring out, okay, does Chris Paul take it? Does Devin Booker take take the last shot? So just figuring out through those things, the scheming behind it, um, how they're going to get Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton going, but also mixing in Devin Booker, and then obviously having Mikal, Jay Crowder, Cam Johnson um, get their 10 to 15 points as well. So just figuring all that out, and with the smaller rotation, I just think it's going to take them some time. There's going to be some losses, some growing pains there. But ultimately, again, I think they're a team that should be safely in the playoffs. Um, just because, I mean, Monty Williams is a good coach, and they got the roster to do it. So we'll see how it ends up. But 7 seed, I think 8 seeds their floor. I don't think they should go below that, but 7 makes sense for me, at least right now.
All right, so if I'm a good host, well, I'm not even the host of this, but I'm pretending to be the host this time. So that means I have to ask you a follow-up question. So there's been a lot of talk, at least that I've heard recently, about Chris Paul and that every team he plays for, he brings the pace way down. So like he left Houston, and Houston went from like almost dead last in pace up to second. And while he went to OKC dropped in pace a bunch. So being that we expect, so Phoenix last year was 10th in the NBA in pace, and being that we expect that to drop, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a great thing, um, for a couple of reasons. This isn't the strongest defensive roster, so the less possessions you have to defend, the better. But two, I think offensively, uh, Devin Booker isn't the transition player, that I don't know, someone like De'Aaron Fox is. I think Devin Booker is really effective getting to his spots and scoring from there. I think Chris Paul is going to do a great job of getting him to his spots in half court. And two, I think this opens up a lot for DeAndre Ayton. He's going to be surrounded by shooters, playing in the half court. He's really just going to have to set that pick and dive, and he's just going to have to just learn how to catch. Just make sure he can catch, and he's going to do really well. I think it's going to slow the game down for DeAndre, and that's really important. I think it's been really fast for him, and his learning curve is been really steep. So having someone like Chris Paul to slow the game down for him, make it simple for him, even if he gets them in a short roll where DeAndre Ayton gets the ball at the free throw line and has to make a decision. I think the game is going to be so much slower in this pace, and I think that's going to be really good for him because all he's going to have to do is either see if the defender steps up to him at the free throw line, he kicks it out to the corner. If they don't, drive and dunk the ball. I think that's how simple they're going to keep the game for him. And I think slowing down the pace is just only going to benefit him. And I really don't think it hurts anyone on this team. Mikal Bridges will get the ball more. Just being a spot up shooter, Jay Crowder is just going to be Jay Crowder. Again, just be a spot up shooter. Same with Cam Johnson. I think a lot of these guys are better as spot up shooters than transition slashers. So I really like the pace, and I think that's going to be really helpful for their young guys.
All right, so that was my host duties for today. So now I just get to go back to my normal questions. So the next team up is Golden State Warriors. We would have them at 6, 7, 8. And this, I think we would both agree that this is the most difficult team to figure out this year. Obviously, they have Steph Curry back. They lose Klay Thompson, so that's very unfortunate for basketball fans everywhere. And for Klay, hopefully he gets healthy soon and is back to playing basketball again, because every basketball player knows that the worst thing to do as a basketball player is have to sit on the sideline and watch other people play. But they also add Kelly Oubre, which I think is a pretty good signing, and they draft James Wiseman, who we think is easily, if not the best, one of the 3 best players in this draft, and fits perfectly with the Warriors. And then they also got Nico Mannion, who's signed to a 2-way, and seems like he can have some decent moments as their backup guard. So they had good moments last year from people like Eric Paschall. We'll see if that can continue for a full season. But regardless, they're going to be better than last year. It's just a matter of how much better are they going to be.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I like the roster. I think you'll get the most out of Andrew Wiggins that you can, having Steph on the floor with him. I think Wiggins is really good at one-on-one situations where he has space. So having Steph on the court is really going to open it up. He only played, I think, 1 game with Steph last year. And then Oubre is just going to add to the defense. So even though Wiggins has all the tools in the world to be an all-defensive player, he can protect Wiggins a little bit there. And obviously Draymond and Wiseman, I mean, their front court is just solid defensively. So everything there lines up to be a playoff team. They obviously, Steph Curry, one of the best players of all time. It don't make sense. But what concerns me is the drop off to the bench. Brad Wanamaker was a great signing. I think that's a great add there. A guy that can control pace, really good defender, and just overall is going to be a really, really solid backup at point guard. But I don't like Jordan Poole. I think he doesn't bring enough to the floor, and he plays a lot of minutes. So for me, that worries me. Damian Lee, again, is just a guy that is going to bring a lot of energy. He's going to be either on or off. He's a very, very streaky shooter. So what can he bring on a night-in, night-out basis? And then Marquise Chris is just not enough for me on the second unit. I love Eric Paschall. I think he brings a lot, but that second unit, how does that mesh with their starting 5, and does that get them above the 8? I don't think so. But anytime you have Steph, if he's healthy the whole season, I think they have a path to get a little bit higher. But I don't know. I think I'd max him out at 5, the 5 seed.
Yep. So next up, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, and that would be number 9. So for me, Memphis isn't going to look a whole lot different. Xavier Tillman, that draft pick is fantastic. I think he fits Memphis about as good as any draft pick fits their current team. Desmond Bane should fill in very nicely there as well. But really, it's just going to be John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. show with Brandon Clark, of course. But I guess the most important part for Memphis is kind of the same thing with the Warriors: is can their stars stay healthy the whole season? And if they can, they're probably going to be competitive for the playoffs.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if they stay healthy all year, I think they should be in the playoffs. I saw someone was saying that Jaren Jackson grew another 2 inches, which would be insane, having him at 7'1". But I think he takes another leap. I mean, he's an unbelievable 3-point shooter for just a basketball player in general, not just as a big. I think he was shooting well over 40%. But I think, yeah, him and Ja are just going to take another leap. That's going to be scary to a lot of teams. Dylan Brooks is just a steady scorer. He's going to get your 15 to 20 points a game, just be steady that all year long. Um, and I don't know. I think that their ceiling is high. Um, they got the bench that they need. I'm interested to see Justice Winslow if he's healthy, how he fits into this. But they got a lot of young talent. Taylor Jenkins is a great coach. You can tell they play hard for him. So I think they're going to really, really battle for a playoff spot. And I think if one West team lets off the gas, they're going to be right there. And I think it's going to be a similar situation as last year. Um, they're going to surprise a lot of people. And ultimately, I think they just missed out in the playing games, but I really like what they're doing there. And I think they have a very, very bright future.
So to be fair to them, almost actually I don't know of anybody that said they were a playoff team last year. And if the playoff format ended the way it normally ends, and we didn't have that second part of the season, so to speak, they were in the playoffs. They were solidly the 8 seed. So if that just continues and you get Ja to take his next step and Jaren Jackson Jr. to take his next step and both stay healthy, it's very hard to see a spot where they're not in the playoffs. So that's the Grizzlies for you. And then next up, we have the Rockets, which would be our 10 seed. That might be surprising to people as well. And if you're trying to look at this roster, I suggest using 2 screens because it's absolutely ridiculous how far I have to scroll just to see the end of it. And I'm not even going to try to talk about all the people on here, but this is part 2 of that John Wall trade, obviously, with John Wall coming to the Rockets. They also picked up a first rounder in that one, signing DeMarcus Cousins as well. And for now, it seems like they're going to run it back with James Harden and see what happens. That appears to be what they would like to do. Nobody really knows what James Harden's thoughts are. So this is just a weird team. Like I like that they forgot that PJ Tucker is no longer a center and like let him be his normal self again and sign someone like Christian Wood because I think he fits very well here without that D'Antoni like spread the floor system. But I think they're always competitive because they obviously have James Harden, and I think they did decently well in free agency. And I think John Wall, if he gets back to his normal self, he can be very helpful. But I don't feel very good about this team.
Yeah, it's really hard to figure out the direction they want to go. They took off the ban of guys being taller than 6'7", so they can sign and play there.
They had to take
I
that
think a sneaky good
that Disney
signing.
World sign and flip it upside down. Like you must be this tall. It's now you must
Yeah,
be this short to ride this ride.
seriously. But I think they did a sneaky good signing here. It was Kenny Wooten, a guy that can really bring rim protection. I think I'm high on him. I think he can be an NBA center just because of his defensive ability and his vertical spacing on offense. Um, but yeah, I mean they're hard to figure out the direction they want to go. Ultimately, it feels like Harden does get traded just because one, he didn't show up, or he was working out in Houston and then left. And obviously camps are starting up. So uh, obviously that's something to monitor. But I think the feud between Harden and the owner, Tillman Fear, I
For
forget how to say
Tida,
his
I think
last
for
name, but
Tida.
Fertitta, he doesn't deserve much of my breath. So I think that feud there is just too much. And I think ultimately he ends up leaving. So with that, bringing a bunch of young guys, wherever that may be, whether that's Karis LeVert, Jared Allen type guys, um, Indiana, like whatever it may be, it's probably not going to be a playoff team. I really like the signing of Christian Wood. I think he's a really good young big that deserves that contract. He deserves to be starting at the 5. Um, but I just don't see Harden coming back and them making the playoffs. But even if he does, it's going to be challenging because of how much better the West got. Um, and the roster just doesn't fit right now. I think there's still some moves to be made, but who knows? We'll see what Houston, but yeah, they're a really hard team to figure out.
All right, so last up
Also,
with
real quick, Mike D'Antoni is a much better coach than Steven Silas. So I think Steven Silas is a fine coach, but I think they lose a lot that you won't necessarily see on the floor to the casual fan. But I think ultimately that's kind of a big step down. Not a big step down, but it's a step down for sure.
yeah, I mean, any coach is going to have a significant roller coaster in their very first season as an NBA head coach. So that's to be expected. So our last team is going to be the New Orleans Pelicans. Again, this would be the team that would be just out of the play-in situation. Uh, Obviously, they lost Drew Holiday. Essentially, it's the same team beyond that. So you take off Drew Holiday, you add Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe. I really wish they kept Drew Holiday because I feel like he made the team much better. But I also really like the addition of Steven Adams. I think he will fit really well and take a lot of pressure off someone like Zion inside. Because last year they had Derek Favors, and I feel like at times he wasn't very helpful. He does rebound, he does a lot right, and he's good veteran presence, but I feel like he was a liability sometimes, and Zion was nowhere near what he was supposed to look like, in my opinion. And he said he was just trying not to mess up. Hopefully that doesn't happen this year, and he just tries to play basketball. But really, this team's going to look fairly similar to what we saw last year. It's going to be a lot more Brandon Ingram, and I think a lot of Zion too. So do you think they got worse from last year? Do you think they're better? Do you think they have a shot to get into the 7 to 10 range, or what are you thinking?
I think they got worse, to be completely honest. Um, Let me just ask this off the top of your head, real quick answer, right? First thing you think of, who's their second best 3-point shooter?
Josh Hart.
Lonzo Ball, if you look at
Yikes.
percentage wise.
Behind
So
JJ.
I think, yeah, of course. Yeah, JJ's number one, obviously. But I think, as much as I love Steven Adams, when you bring him into a lineup that has Zion, Eric Bledsoe, and Lonzo Ball, it's going to be tough. The spacing is going to be terrible. It's going to be interesting too with Stan Van Gundy bringing him in. He's very creative on offense, but he likes to four out. I don't think that favors Zion very much, and I think I'm the only one that's low on Zion. Like, I don't see superstardom that like the next LeBron or anything like that. Um, sure he can make some all stars. He's going to be a player, but I just watching him defensively last year was painful. I think you guys can pick up quickly that if you don't play defense well, you're not going to be one of my favorite players. So I think his defensive struggle is worse than people are making it out to be. So obviously Steven Adams is going to help that, but offensively that crowd spacing. So how much can they actually play together? Plays more small. So then how does that fit on defense? But with all that being said, like they just got a lot of weird pieces, especially in the backcourt. We'll just see how that rotation ends up. Does Nikhil and Alexander Walker lose time now because they drafted Lewis? Like, how does that go? How much is Eric Bledsoe figure out? And then defensively, they're really not there. So I don't see them as a playoff team.
All right, and if you've watched Duke if you watch Zion at Duke, I think you would have picked up on the fact that he wasn't good. He relied way too much on his athleticism defensively, and so like Michael and I saw them play in the Elite Eight and Sweet 16 against better teams, Virginia Tech and Michigan State, and almost always he was not where he was supposed to be, but he made up for it in being athletic. And now that he's at the NBA level, of course he's more athletic than a lot of people in the NBA, but they're still very athletic as well. So the gap of athleticism is not near what it was when he was at college. So he can't just make up for being in the wrong position on rotations and stuff like that with his athleticism. So Zion, I think, can be a very good player, but he has a lot farther to go than a lot of people think. And I think that's going to hurt him also in the long run because he's on the wrong side of that LeBron thing where everybody thinks he's supposed to be a superstar, and his path to get to that superstardom is going to be difficult. And that's coming from a Duke fan who worshipped Zion last year. So, like, I'm a Zion fan, and I think he has a lot more to go than some people think. So that's our 6 through 10, 6 through 11, really, of each conference. And we're going to wrap up the podcast with something called All In. So it's really all in or tear it down. But we're going to take two teams, one from each conference, and we are going to discuss. Really, Michael's going to tell you what he would do if he was the general manager. So the first team, since we just did the Western Conference, will just stay in the West. And we're going to choose the Houston Rockets, who we've kind of alluded to could do a lot with their roster, and definitely have some moves out there that will happen. It's just a matter of when. So putting on your, I don't even know who the general manager is right now since Maury's gone, but putting on your Michael Branch as the general manager of the Rockets hat, what are we doing?
As a to be in, because star player hates you're kind of the awkward middleman to that. Ultimately, if I can't happy, obviously tied to that's fine. So being the Rockets GM is a tough role right now because you have your star player that doesn't like your owner, and how do you mend that relationship? As you see, owners don't change very often, so you can't just get rid of them. So ultimately, I would end up moving them. I would obviously want to send them east. So first place I would look, Boston Celtics. Let me have Jason Tatum. Ideally, they have Tatum and Brown. Obviously, that's probably not going to happen. But I'm shopping him there. Like, I'll take Tatum, Harden straight up. Like that, I think that would be fair because one, Tatum's young. You just signed the extension, so I got a young star locked in. Makes more sense with John Wall, but probably not happen. Boston probably. Danny Ainge is like, oh, I got all these picks that I'm just not going to trade. So, so if that doesn't work, I'll go to Atlanta. Be like, your young guys. You can keep Trey. That's fine. I'll take Cam. I'll take DeAndre. I'll take Kevin Herter. Just send them all. I'll take a Kongwu, and throw in a couple of draft picks.
You can have John too because he's on expiring.
Yeah, like give me as many young guys as you can. But that's what I'm doing as a Houston GM. I'm tearing it down. It was a good run. One game away from the NBA Finals, where they probably could have easily won it. Not easily, but they could have won the finals if they got there. So I'm shopping them, and I'm trying to get as many young guys as I can, as many picks as I can to really restart. I think it works well because John Wall doesn't have the best contract, so that's where you would have to fill in with a lot of young guys on their rookie contracts. And by the time his contract's up, now my cap space opens up. I can re-sign them to these new rookie deals. Hopefully one of these lands. If not, I'm drafting young guys, and hopefully getting rid of Harden brings me down to the bottom 8 where I can get a guy like Jalen Johnson, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, someone like that really can turn around a franchise pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean that. I don't think Brooklyn. I would have to get Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Nick Claxton, Jared Allen, and a lot of picks. I think all those guys are good, but I think that's ultimately where they end up is they're good. They don't become great. They don't become all-stars. So I would have to get a lot of picks where I can take more chances on getting all-stars. But yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing as a Houston GM for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, they're obviously already on the process of blowing it up since they got rid of their GM and coach left, whether it was mutual or what. But it's weird that they're kind of running it back almost after blowing up the front office. So we'll see what happens. But we'll go to the East now with the Indiana Pacers. We kind of alluded to this earlier also, but a weird roster and a team that does not seem to be they won't have the same roster by the time we get to playoff time, I think. So first of all, who is the trade piece? Is it Oladipo? Is it Miles Turner? Is it both? And if it is, what would you try to get in return?
So I would enter the season with this team, let them play, hope. I would really want him to show that he has value because right now you could probably get, I don't know, Blake Griffin and maybe for Victor Oladipo, like a guy coming off injury that doesn't have the best contract. Like that's kind of his ceiling for his value. I don't think you're getting a young guy that has any promise. I, I think you're going to get a young guy that maybe has fallen out of favor, but his value right now is not great. Maybe it's a first round pick and a salary that from a playoff team that's not going to be a great pick. So I go into the season letting him play. Hopefully he comes back and shows that he's Victor Oladipo of old, and try to gain some value there, and then showing I'm just getting rid of him. I don't think enough on the floor to offset what he damaged off the floor. So I'm just trying to get anything I can for him, get out of that salary as well, and not take on too much salary coming back. It's got to be expiring like his is. And then Miles Turner, I love Miles Turner. I think he fits. But with them re-signing Sabonis, I think it makes sense to get rid of them. They can play together, but probably not ideal. And I would not trade him to the Lakers for Kuzma. That, nope. Just Kuzma has no value to me, and the Lakers don't have anything else. So never doing that deal. I know it's brought up a lot. Just not going to happen. But I am going to send him out to a team where I can get a younger guy, maybe send to Denver for Gary Harris. I don't know, someone like that. I know what they can do on the floor. They're maybe not going to be an all-star, but
You just gotta stop trying to get all your favorite players on
and
your favorite team.
try to.
That's the issue.
I was just scrolling through teams and just seeing like, hey, I could probably use them. I mean, like I only picks as I could, maybe a first in a couple of seconds. But if I'm Indiana, yeah, I'm keeping Sabonis, I'm keeping Brogdon. Everyone else is for sale, and even though I love TJ Warren, he's just not on the same timeline. So I think I would probably end up getting rid of TJ Warren as well. But yeah, I'm keeping Brogdon, I'm keeping Sabonis, staying faithful to those guys. Yeah, trying to have a fire sale for sure.
All right, so you heard it here first. If you're Houston and if you're Indiana, blow it up, tear it down, start again. And those are 6 through, if I get this right, one time would be a miracle. Those are 6 through 11 of each conference. Um, and next time we're going to write the numbers out so I don't have to think about it. And we'll do 1 through 5 of each conference for our next one. And then maybe like a coach's hot seat or something like that, because we got plenty of coaches with some really hot seats at this point, I think.
Yeah, a lot of guys are sweating.
So that's it for this NBA pod. Please remember to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. You are obligated to give us 5 stars. Even if you hate it, you still give us 5 stars, and then you just tell us why you hate it. But please give the 5 stars first. And thank you for listening, and hopefully you like all the new segments. And we got some cool interviews coming down the pipeline. So